Hey everyone, it's Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I have a book review for you for a book that I promised to review the whole trilogy back in October, and I am so sorry I could not get around to this. I just did not have the time, the mental ability, the mental capacity to be able to do it because I'm in management at my job. It's been crazy. The last 2 weeks I've been doing a split shift. It's been nuts. Frankly, it's been insane. I haven't been able to keep up with anything, much less my housework and stuff too. So it's been a little wild. I've been trying to catch up, and now I can finally come around and do the review for at least the first book of the trilogy I promised to review back in October. Again, I apologize for that. And that would be the Pine Deep Trilogy from Jonathan Maberry. I read all three books about 10 years ago, and I loved them. They were recommended to me from another fellow named Mike here on the YouTube, and I loved it. Loved them. They won, at least the first book here, Ghost Road Blues, won a Bram Stoker Award for Best First Novel from Jonathan Maberry. I don't know how long he'd been writing before this. I know he had only done a few karate books or something. I don't know if he had written under any kind of pseudonym or anything, whatever. But it's fantastic. It's a fantastic first book. I remember the second book in this trilogy, which is Dead Man's Song, which I've not started yet, but I put my bookmark in there. Dead Man's Song, also a really nice cover. This one's my favorite looking cover. I love that yellow to it, man. It's just beautiful on my shelf. I remember the second book, Dead Man's Song, having kind of a lanky middle to it, you know what I mean? Not being the best middle, but I remember the third book, the final book, Bad Moon Rising, with another great cover, being the best book that I was just so engaged and so sucked into. So many great, just crazy things that happen here I remember and just love. I love the characters of this series. I'll tell you right now, Ghost Road Blues is a great kickoff point, but I will say this, I have a little bit of variant opinion from what I remembered. I had a very rose-tinted glasses experience with this time around. It's the second time I ever read it, and reading it this time, I realized kind of more of the flaws this time, and that's what's going to happen on any kind of time that you intake something a second time, whether it be a video game, book, movie, anything, TV show. You're going to experience the flaws the second time around that you just kind of glossed over because you were so sucked into it the first time around. Also, what I was super stoked about, I bought this off a shelf for, as that ticket says, $6.50 at the store over in Tennessee that I love so much. It turns out it's signed by the great Jonathan Maberry himself, one of my favorite authors, probably my top three up there with R.L. Stine and Brian Keene. Top five would also include Stephen King. I consider Jonathan Maberry an absolute classic of the horror subgenre or genre, whatever you want to call this. I have a signed copy of Ghost Road Blues. I lost my mind when I found this. When I found the signature, actually, because I didn't find the signature for like another week until I got home from the vacation we went on this year, where I bought this book at. But Ghost Road Blues takes place in a small Pennsylvania town called Pine Deep, and you have a lot of different characters, a lot of back history to this particular area. The book starts off with a pretty crazy prologue about this guy called the Bone Man killing this other guy who was called the Devil, essentially, who, this is kind of an urban legend the way it's told, and Jonathan Maberry loves his urban legends. He loves his old classic horror movies. There's a lot of different throwbacks to old things. If you love, like, Romero stuff, if you love Carpenter stuff, there's a lot of cool things that's throwing back to Universal Monster references, all kinds of cool stuff like that in here. I'm going to tell you up front, this book is a little wild. I didn't realize how much was going on at one time when I read this the first time around. It's extremely impactful. It's a fast-paced read. It's like, if you could take the poetic nature of Stephen King sometimes, and his less wordy books, if you can take the poetic nature of Stephen King and mix them with the storytelling of Richard Lehman, with the gore and everything, that's what Jonathan Maberry is. And that's why he deserves so much more credit. Now, the problem is that he's kind of gone away from this type of writing. He's gone towards his other series called Joe Ledger that makes him the most money, where he has like 15 books already for this series over the course of the last 10 years he's been publishing them. And, the Joe Ledger series, I've read like the first 5 or 6 books of, and they're alright. They're alright. There's some really good ones in there, like the first one called Patient Zero, and there's some other ones in there that I like, but they're not great. There's been some pretty horrible ones in there. And I won't get into that right now. I'll get into that one day. But for now, the Pine Deep Trilogy is what he started off with. It was his bread and butter back in the day. He won Bram Stoker Awards on this. He has other series I love too, like the Rot and Ruin series, which is a YA zombie series, but it doesn't read like YA. It's fantastic, man. Jonathan Maberry is extremely talented. He wrote the novelization for The Wolfman. I love that too. I love Maberry's work. He's fantastic. Everything I read from him I get engaged with in some way, facet, or form. Even if it's a bad book, it's a bad Maberry book, which means it's good compared to most authors. Probably better than most authors, I would say. Ghost Road Blues is mostly focused on this town that has moved away from these bad days where all these murders happen. Like I said, that myth that we're kind of hearing about the Bone Man killing the devil and burying him out in the woods, then the Bone Man's put to death. The Bone Man comes back to life as like a ghost, and he has a guitar and whatnot. And he's just kind of wandering around this time of the beginning of Halloween in October, you know. Apparently the whole trilogy takes place within the month of October, and kind of escalates more and more with each book as you read these. Like I said, the second book's kind of got that middle book syndrome where it slumps a little bit, but overall it was a good book too from what I remember. But Ghost Road Blues is fantastic. It starts off in a very non-supernatural place, and eventually just climbs itself into that more and more as the book goes along. The ending really opens up the door to what the hell is going to happen next. And I forgot how impactful and how crazy the ending of this book was. Now, what's really happening here is this town is a very quiet town. You have some characters who have their own businesses and stuff. I'll get into those characters in a moment. But there are some criminals from Philadelphia who've made their way into town. 3 particular ones who've done a heist or something, some kind of cocaine drug stealing thing. They come into town. One of them is named Ruger. He's one of the big bads in the book. There's another fellow named Boyd. There's another guy. I don't remember who he is. He didn't last long. But they come in, they crash their car out in a cornfield, and they go wandering around and start to terrorize the town. Now, the big players that we follow in this book are, for example, Crow. Crow is a cool guy. I love to death. He's an ex-alcoholic. He just gets deputized because you have the FBI in Pennsylvania in Pine Deep's town trying to find these criminals who are out doing God knows what. They don't know if they're going to pass through or not. So the FBI are in town working with the current sheriff's department and the deputies and whatnot. Crow gets deputized again. He has to go out back in the field after he had not been in the field for a while. He has a girlfriend named Val that he lives with, or Valerie, and Val is great. I love the chemistry between the two. I love the way Mayberry writes dialogue. Looking back now, the second time through, not all of it rings perfectly. Excuse me, my throat's really dry today. Cold front coming through Virginia, man. I'm telling you, snow in no time. I doubt it, but still. A guy can dream. So, Val and Crow have a great relationship. It feels a little too much like a Joss Whedon type thing, sometimes with the kind of humor, the way it's written and whatever. But Crow is genuinely funny. I genuinely don't laugh almost ever when I read books. I don't care who it's from, one of my favorite authors or not. Mayberry can always get one out of me, especially with Crow. Crow is just a lovable guy. I love that character. He's just fun. He's just a fun guy. He owns a store that is basically Halloween goods, like decorations, pranks, that kind of thing. He's that kind of guy. He's a jokester. But he also runs a Halloween tour, and you start the book off really focusing on that, of a Halloween tour on a haunted hayride where people are riding through like a haunted hayride and they're getting attacked and people are genuinely scared because of how crazy the actors and stuff are at this particular thing. That's a great time. I don't think I've read any horror book in my entire life. The last 10 years I've been seriously reading and enjoying, as a hobby, novels, horror novels. I don't think I've ever seen that in a novel. Ever. So it kind of surprised me to see that so integral to a particular character in the book. And that's great. Valerie lives on the farm with her dad. Her dad's a great character. I really like him. She has a sister named Connie. She has a brother-in-law named Mark. Or is it a brother Mark and a sister-in-law named Connie? It's something like that. They're around this time of the year too, on the farm. And as a matter of fact, they get held captive by those criminals. Well, one in particular. And he terrorizes them, and Crow is out doing some other stuff. And you have some other characters that are pretty great, frankly. I love the characters in this book. I think that they were all great. From what I remember, all the characters throughout the whole series I loved. The big bad kind of looming over everything is the devil himself, named Ubel Griswold, who may or may not be dead. We don't know. We don't know what kind of supernatural ability he has, but some reason he may or may not be drawing people to the town. There were certain people who were involved with the murder of the Bone Man the night that he killed the devil, which is Ubel Griswold, the villain, the big bad. The people who killed the Bone Man, like one particular guy, his name is Vic. He's the stepfather to a young boy named Mike, and he beats and abuses them brutally. And Mike is a lovable character. He's kind of becoming more and more friends with Crow, the shop owner. And Mike is just a sweet kid. I love him to death. He's just kind of a weirdo, nerdy kind of kid, He's not like your average kid. He's a little delusional, a little odd, kind of trapped in his own little world, as most kids and teens are. He calls himself Iron Mike Sweeney. He's great. I love Mike. And his story is so sad. It breaks my heart every time I even think about this book. The abuse that he goes through. He's just so beat down all the time by Vic. Vic is such an evil bastard, dude. I can't stand him. You have some other guys too. Jim Polk, who is a cop, and he's pretty awful. You know, you get introduced to certain cops from Philly and certain detectives and whatnot. They're pretty cool too. You don't get a whole lot of them in this book. You get more of them in the sequel. I remember that. Dead Man's Song, the second book. But there's some great stuff here. There's some really great stuff here. I love most of these characters. You also have the mayor of the town named Terry, and you're watching him have to deal with the stress of trying to make sure the town is okay and protected in case these villains, these crazy criminals, have made themselves into Pine Deep somehow. But like I said, there's kind of a supernatural undercurrent going on that Ubel Griswold may or may not be tied to, kind of drawing people to the town that are all evil, like Ruger, like I said, the big bad of the book, kind of in just this book, but he's kind of just a henchman too. Ruger's nuts. He's just nuts. He is so frightening and so scary. You could picture somebody being real and being like this in reality, in the real world. There's so many great characters in here, man, and just so many great experiences. There's one other guy, too, named Tow Truck Eddie, who reminds me a lot of Trash Can Man from The Stand by Stephen King. And I think a lot of The Stand is in the blood of this book, of the series, this trilogy. It has this very closing in apocalypse doom situation feel to it in the undercurrent. You can always feel like something else is coming. Something worse is coming down the pipeline. And that's what this book feels like a lot of the time. The tension builds and builds and builds. The writing and poetic nature of it are so good. So good. Like I said, when you really take a step back and look at the whole story of this book, it does feel like part one to a trilogy. And that's what I realized this time around. I always thought they always felt pretty good about being book one, book two, book three, all secluded in a good book by itself. I will say, if you're going to buy this book, go ahead and buy books 2 and 3. I think you'll love all of them. I really do. I think anybody who has any kind of idea that they don't really know if they're going to like it or not, pick it up. I guarantee you're going to love these. They're so good. They don't really have so much gore in here, but they have a little bit. But I will tell you this. The third act is wild. It's a wild conclusion of the book. I hope that if you end on a bad note there, you're not going to like the second and third book more than likely. You might get one over, I don't know. But I think most people who are going to read this are going to love it. It's a blast, man. There's a reason this won a Bram Stoker Award for Best First Novel. It was up against a lot of good stuff from what I've read about. I don't remember the exact titles, but I remember it being up against some pretty solid stuff at that time. But I'm so thankful that if any book I've ever had signed from Mayberry that I found, it's this one. Because of how much I love this. This is my first Mayberry book based on my friend Mike's recommendation back in the day. It's so worth it. It's such a great read. All 3 of the books are really good. Mainly this one and the third one. The cover's great, like I said. The writing style's so poetic. Mayberry has such a way that he writes that I just love it so much. I could rave all day long about Ghost Road Blues. I wish I'd gotten all these books read for the Halloween season. It feels like Halloween. It feels like the month. It feels like the things you look forward to in that month. Everything from your pumpkin spice latte at Starbucks over to, real candy. Like real candy, like the stuff you just binge on. It just feels like Halloween as you read just this first book. All of them feel like that, but this first book alone is great like that. There's so many cool things I picked up on here that I did not know about the first time I read these books like 10 years ago. Little details I'd forgotten about. I can't wait to work my way back through these again and really experience it all, take it all in again. Great book. Great read. I could not recommend it enough. If you haven't read Ghost Road Blues, I highly recommend it to you once again. If I had to rate the book on a 5-star basis, I would easily give this a 5 out of 5 stars. It's so good. It's a fantastic read. So impactful. About 500 pages long, too, by the way. 470, something like that. I'll tell you right now, it flies by. It's a fly-by book. You're going to get obsessed with it, I think. Just go ahead and buy book 2 and 3 if you're going to buy this. Great reads. The audiobooks are good, too. I'm going to let you know that, too. The narration's fantastic on those. But anyway, that's my review for Ghost Road Blues. What did you think about the Pine Deep trilogy if you've read these? What did you think about the first book, Ghost Road Blues, if you've read that one? Do you love these characters the way I do? The situation they're in, there's not a whole lot of crazy situations going on. There's some interesting scenes in here, but there's not just crazy, big scope story. It's building into that, and I promise you that. I've read all of these. I love them to death. I'm telling you, be patient. If you want a bigger story after this book, you will get one. I promise you, Bad Moon Rising is not... It's the most satisfying book I've ever read for a trilogy. This is my favorite trilogy of books ever. Anyway, Ghost Road Blues, phenomenal book, 5 out of 5 stars from me. I love it. I recommend it constantly to people. I hope you check it out. I hope you take my recommendation, check it out. My boy Austin, if you're watching this book review, Austin, you gotta read this, man. You have got to read this. I think you'll love it one of these days whenever you get around to it. He's got a lot of books right now. He's doing a challenge, by the way, where he's not buying more books. I have a feeling he's going to be like me and not follow that. You should buy this. If you're going to cheat on your little lifestyle, not buying more books, you should buy the Ghost Road Blues book and the trilogy and whatever. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. God bless you. Happy Thanksgiving and goodbye.